Okay, Algebra 2, Lesson 516, we're going to add, subtract, and multiply complex numbers. You can think, well, what exactly is a complex number? It's a real number added or subtracted to an imaginary number. Now, an imaginary number, you might remember we talked about last week, I was really, by definition, the square root of -1. Okay, so this was this brand new type of a number that we're dealing with, I. And then also, wow, this is going to play a huge role in our lesson in just a little bit. You want to memorize that whenever you see I squared, I to the second power, that's really -1. So that's even more common right here. This I squared equals -1. We're going to keep referring to this now for the rest of this chapter. But listen, today we're just going to be adding complex numbers to get us started. Here's our first learning target. I can add or subtract complex numbers. Guys, here's the cool thing. Even if you didn't know I was an imaginary number, you could still do this problem if you just thought about combining like terms. In other words, if you thought of I as a variable. Really, I is the square root of -1, but the cool thing is when you're adding, you just combine like terms. What's -3 plus 5? What do you think? That's a 2. And what's a 2i minus 6i? What's that? Minus 4i. We are done. That's all you got to do. Now, I hope that's really encouraging news. Now, subtracting was always the more complicated type of arithmetic. It's probably the second type of arithmetic you learn. It's the second type of arithmetic we're going to do here. The thing is, you're going to have to be careful to distribute this negative. Whenever you're subtracting, you're going to have to distribute that negative. So this negative goes in front of the 2. We'll say a -2. And a negative make a plus. We'll have a plus 5i. It's as if we're just distributing a -1 to those parentheses. Here's the wonderful news. Now you just combine your like terms. What's a 6 and a -2? That adds up to a 4. What's -2i plus 5i? Well, a positive 3i. We are done. Like I said, you treat this pretty much just as you would ordinary variables, and you'll be fine. Subtraction, you just distribute your negative. Now, as we finish up these last two problems, like I said, a wonderful short lesson today. New learning topic here, learning target. I can multiply complex numbers. So we're going to distribute. We're going to do that real quick. 2i times -1, you'd get -2i. What do you think 2i times a 3i is? A 6i squared. But we said earlier, and this is why this is so very important. Whenever you see I squared, we're going to remember that that's really -1. So this is the huge difference that we're going to have between just treating this like an ordinary variable. I squared becomes the number -1. Now, I think so very often kids will say, well, it's -2i plus -6, and that's true. That's really true. Standard form, though, they're asking you to write in standard form. Standard form is saying something very different. They're saying put the real number first, then put the imaginary number after it. So if they're saying put that in standard form, even though mathematically my answer is correct at the bottom, I'm not following the directions of being in standard form. I got to put my -6 first, and then I'd say plus a -2i, but plus a negative is the same thing as subtracting. Put your real number first, and you are done. Okay? One last problem, and then we're through. Take a look at our final one of the day. we've got to FOIL. We've got to distribute. So I'm going to take 6 times 4, and I'll get 24. 6 times minus 2i is a minus 12i. 3i times 4 will be a plus 12i. And then 3i times negative 2i is a negative 6i squared. I think what kids are going to notice immediately, and we have to be used to this, is terms can cancel out. A negative 12i and a positive 12i completely wipe out. That's not always going to happen, but it can happen, and we have to be prepared for that. Now, over here, that I squared is really just negative 1. Negative 6 times negative 1 is going to get you a plus 6. 24 plus 6 is a 30, and we are done.